So, as we said before, the important principle of phenomenology is intentionality, and phenomenology is sort of a systematic study of this principle and the different modes of intentionality, the way that consciousness will refer to its objects, or the way consciousness experiences the worlds. And the idea is that when you analyze this principle, the way physicists analyze empirical data, that you'll discover the pure ideal laws that govern logic. It's sort of like a scientific study of these principles. It's sort of like Kant in a way, that he thought he was expounding the principles of transcendental logic. But the trouble is that we don't just attend to this pure mode of appearance all the time. We don't just experience intentions. When we come to the world with these preconceived notions about what this reality is. These could be scientific or superstitious. We might have this mythological system that we think explains all of our reality, or we also have modern science where we believe things are made of atoms, that we have neurochemical reactions in our brain. These are both instances of what Husserl calls the natural attitude. It's just this our typical way of looking at the world.
And one has logical proof.
Okay, yeah, but anyways, he thinks. I mean, yeah, he definitely thinks that he definitely isn't saying that science isn't legitimate, but he's saying to study ideal laws, you have to
suspect. What is ideal law?
Basically laws that are above the real.
Well, science is not above the real. Science is on the real.
Yeah, but that's what he's saying. That he's saying that logic has to be separate from physical systems. So we're gonna get into this later.
Okay.
But basically, Kant, he's just he's trying to analyze the pure laws of logic. So pure in the sense that they're not involved in experience. So it can't be drawn from scientific evidence at all. He's saying that can't be the foundation for logical systems.
Why?
I'll explain later. But anyways, just know that he's interested in this pure ideal realm.
Okay.
And in phenomenology, we need to be disciplined about suspending our beliefs in what the underlying nature of reality is like. We have to analyze objects only as they appear to us. And this is this suspension of belief that he calls an epoche. And it's actually a Greek term that was it comes from the Greek political system of suspending judgment. But that's the term he uses for this practice in phenomenology, which is often translated as a bracketing. Not discarding science for sure, but bracketing all of your presuppositions when you're analyzing things phenomenologically. So the reason he prescribes this is pretty much to avoid that problem we highlighted earlier of psychologism. That was the critique from Frege. So in his view, phenomenology is trying to put scientific knowledge back in touch with its true origin, which comes from experience. And it needs to analyze experience only as it appears. And he's saying that no scientific system can take precedence over this form of explanation. Because all scientific systems depend upon logical inference. And he's saying that logic has its origin in these ideal laws of consciousness. So he's saying no scientific explanation can take precedence over phenomenology. And through the epoche, we get in touch with experience just as it appears. And we no longer consider it to be some part of some material system. Something he would consider very problematic is the tendency to collapse everything into neuroscience, to consider consciousness as just some after effect of neurons. That's part of the natural attitude, and that has to be suspended. We have to look at just how we experience reality.
But we want to find out why.
So that's what he thinks phenomenology will explain the why, as long as it has these like, well, not the why, for instance, but it will establish these logical laws that are the foundation for a science.
That doesn't. That's not contradictory with neuroscience or anything.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about why on the next slides. Um, but he thinks he thinks if you explain it in terms of neuroscience,
Mm-hmm.
and he thinks the temptation is too great to rest on those explanations when we're analyzing consciousness. The like if you explain it in terms of neuroscience, it'll inevitably lead to psychologism.
What is that again?
That logical laws depend on psychological factors.
I don't see how it leads to that.
Because, like, if it's just some structure in the brain that explains our logical processes,
Yeah, but it doesn't.
then you're taking that as the foundation.
Like, that's how we perceive information. But that doesn't compromise the information itself.
Well, I think if we get to the example I have of psychologism, we'll have like a more fruitful discussion.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Okay, so this is this helpful example I found of from a book that Jinming actually had me read. It's a science fiction book called. It's the second part of the three body problem. It's called The Dark Forest. This is a cool artist rendering of of an important sequence in that book, which I won't spoil. This was by Shaolin Zung. I just found it on the internet. But yeah, so there's this section in this book that, according to Husserl's philosophy, must be absolutely impossible. So
Which part?
that's so. Remember when there was this accidental discovery when they were scanning brains and trying to map out, basically reconstruct the human brain in like digital systems. When they were scanning the brain, they accidentally discovered that by radiating this one part of the brain, or like through this electromagnetic treatment, they could sort of reconfigure the wiring and then like change the logical propositions that subject believes. So yeah, it seems so the idea is that they accidentally, while trying to just like study how people reason logically, they give them something that's obviously true, like water is not toxic, and they were able, like they wanted to, like they, well, I think in the example it was like obviously false. Water is toxic. We have water all the time, and they were able to like like change the wiring of the brain so that they believed in this proposition, so that they sort of like short-circuited their logical reasoning, and then convinced them that water is toxic in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then like they refused to drink it and they had to like force feed it, and it became, in the book it becomes this like huge like ethical disaster, and then there's this like these international norms to outlaw this type of scientific practice. Mm-hmm. So it becomes like this like nuclear non-proliferation type of treaty, never to try to change people's minds like physically. So according to Husserl, like this type of like this situation wouldn't just be like morally problematic, it would be like absolutely impossible. So like in his idea, the laws of logic cannot depend on particular neurological conditions, and they couldn't be revised according to like physical factors in your brain. Like yeah, like if all of our logic depended on neurons, like, or on the way our brain is constructed, there just wouldn't be a foundation for science anymore. Because like to understand neuroscience, like we depend upon logic, we process it logically, and we form our understanding there. So if we were able to discover some things in neuroscience that forced us to revise logic, or that we could change the way a particular subject reasons logically, it would be just unthinkable because there wouldn't be any foundation anymore. There'd be no like final principle to which we could say, yes, this is a correct scientific reasoning, because it would all be like contingent. It would all depend on just the way our brains are wired. And if people could start changing that, then they could change our reality. Yeah, like, according to the Kantian system, logic plays a role in like constructing the world we perceive. So there just wouldn't, it would be like total anarchy, and there just wouldn't be a reality anymore. So he thinks this situation isn't just like something to be prevented for moral reasons. It's like real totally unthinkable.
I think this is an extreme case, like like water is toxic. This is extreme, but there are examples where people's brain have different reactions when their hormone changes, or when they have brain damage.
Yeah, I think there are definitely. Yeah, but Husserl would say like there certainly are contingent differences in how people experience reality, but there is some logical core that must be consistent across, that must be universal. Like there are some things that are necessary, like mathematical reasoning. Like we couldn't rewire someone so that they had like a defective adder or something, and then they're no longer able to see like objective mathematical laws. Like he's saying that can't be just because like God implanted this like ability to add, or like that this like consensus of how like numbers work was implanted on us. It must be objective, like really independent of our mind. So like basically he thinks that logical laws like this, that like our scientific understanding of the world, like, or like logical propositions, like must depend not on like real constructs, but on like on ideal laws. So there must be a separation between the real and the ideal, or else science doesn't work. Like there'd be no foundation for any logical inference. So this leads him to a version of transcendental idealism, which he thinks is really the necessary foundation. Yeah, so that's basically the main principles of phenomenology. Like he set out to restore the foundations of logic and scientific reason, and he believed that any suitable foundation required some version of idealism, and that that there's a separation between ideal and real. And he tried to expound ideal laws in like a scientific fashion. Like he didn't think, like he thought if we just tried to explain physical laws through like experimental analysis, we would never have a complete system of science. Like you have to expound the ideal laws as well. And phenomenology is his project that sets out to do that. It is like a disciplined mode of analysis that brackets prior presuppositions, and that it just observes the pure intentions of conscious experience, and that would lead him to an understanding of logic. So yeah, thank you. That's the basis of phenomenology, or an introduction to it. But yeah, there's a whole lot more to it, even to Husserl, but we didn't really get there. But
I hope I'll realize how it changes my life immediately after this presentation.
I mean, now you don't have to think that everything rests on neurons, which is incorrect.
I think like how we process information, how we think, it all depend on the biochemical reaction.
But
like the mind is biochemical.
But then there'd be no foundation for science.
So we perceive it. We perceive the outside world and process those signals.
Yeah, but how is it universal for everyone if it depends on your brain?
The same
just accidentally?
No, like we're the same species. You probably have different experience from the elephants.
Yeah, that's what Husserl thinks is incorrect.
How does he know?
Because like there must be objective laws in scientific reasoning.
Yeah, I think like because we share the same, like we're both mammals, so.
What do you mean? How does he know? He gave you valid reasons for thinking that. for thinking that there must be a version of idealism.
It's either I was distracted or
Oh,
or
I
it
don't
was
know.
not persuasive.
I don't know what it will take to convince you.
I just think that like all our thinking mind are because of the biochemical reactions in the brain.
To me, that's inconsistent because there must be some foundation that is objective.
Why? Why must be there some foundation of objectivity?
Like, how did humans all agree about mathematics?
We all perceive things like we like that's a I think mathematics like 1 plus 1 equal to 2, like that's objective, and we all perceive it with our eyes and the brain.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
are logical laws objective?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
But then, so then how does our brain, like, how do we all come to an understanding of this?
We have a brain, biochemical reactions.
So, okay, so that, I don't see how both of those facts could be true. How there's a brain that's contingent, and then there's also...
Like, our brain are pretty much the same.
See, this is what Husserl's saying. It can't just depend on, like, the contingent factors of the brain.
It's basically our brains are basically the same.
But even if they were different, then we would still have the same logical laws.
Yeah, exactly. But I may not perceive it. My brain may not be developed enough to know it.
But, like, imagine all of humanity happened to turn out in that incorrect way, wouldn't it then be made correct?
Turn out to what way?
Like, let's say, like, all of humanity agreed that, like happened to experience, I don't know, 1 plus 1 is 3.
Mm-hmm. How did that happen?
There was some wiring in their brain that just had an exception for that case. Let's just say that developed. Then would that be then correct?
I mean, in our world it would be, because that's how we perceive things. But do you think a bacteria knows that 1 plus 1 equals 2?
No.
Exactly.
So
why doesn't it know?
So I think it's a philosophical question where these laws come from.
So why doesn't it know?
That's what I'm asking too, through phenomenology.
No, you need to ask this through biology.
So yeah, I don't think the explanation will be found in the brain.
Because bacteria doesn't have a brain.
Yeah, I know they don't, but I don't think the foundations of arithmetic will be found in the human brain.
As the study of neuroscience explains how we process this information.
But it doesn't explain mathematics.
No, it doesn't need to. It's not the goal of neuroscience anyway. I'm just saying the way we think and the concepts of mind all come from biochemical reactions.
Okay, well, this clearly didn't affect Jinming, but I hope you all liked it. Thank you.
Thank you.